Okay, so let's begin our discussion for chapters 8 and 9. Chapter 8 is on indexes, registers, and health data collection. So I want to first begin by stating that indexes, registers, and registries allow health information to be maintained and retrieved by healthcare facilities and is used for the purposes of education, planning, research, and so forth. So when we look at indexes as it applies to patient information, indexes are used to provide a guide or to serve as a guide or to point out information in a healthcare facility. They're usually alphabetized based on names, places, subjects, and they usually come in several different types. You may have a disease index, a procedure index, a physician index. Okay, so you have what you call a MPI. This is a master patient index, and so the purposes that it serves I have on the slide. The very first thing I have listed is a customer database, meaning that this is a database that has all of the different type of, and when I say customers, I'm referring to patients and their information as it applies to them. It helps facilities to determine if a patient has been previously treated at a healthcare facility. Automated MPIs are usually computer-based, and the manual MPIs are those indexes that are kept up on with pre-printed information on index cards. So the three different types, as I made mention before, are the disease, the procedure, and the physician's indexes. Now, of course, you have an activity this week that's going to talk about those three different type of indexes, and you're basically going to look at those indexes to answer some questions based off of what you see in the figures for the disease, procedure, and physician index. So with the disease index, this is the index that is organized with patient information according to the diagnosis codes. The procedure index is patient information that is organized based on codes and or CPT and HCPCS codes. And of course the physician index is organized according to the numbers that have been assigned by the facility to physicians who actually treat patients, both the inpatients and the outpatients. Okay, so now that we've made mention of those particular three, the next slide just kind of shows you a screen or what a data entry screen for an MPI, a master patient index, would look like. If you look on here really well, you should see why it would be classified as a master patient index, because it has several components of the patient information. It has some of the most important pieces of a patient information as well. Okay, now that's the automated version of an MPI. The index card version is on this next slide. This is a picture patient John James Doe. It has all of his pertinent information on there about him concerning his admission dates, his discharge dates, what provider he saw every day, what type of visit it was, IP, inpatient, ED, emergency department, and OP stands for outpatient. So he was inpatient, then at one visit he went through the emergency room, at another visit he was an outpatient, and the index card basically, or indexes basically, keeps up with a patient, travels with them every time they go and actually see the physician. Disease index is my next slide. As you can see, it is categorized based on these ICD-9 codes that you see here on this slide. And what it does on here versus putting the patient name, it actually just puts the patient's MR number, which is a 6-digit located to the right of the index card. Then you have the procedure index. As you notice, with the procedure index codes, you have your procedures listed, like you have your primary procedures, and then other procedures, who the attending doctors were, and again, instead of patient's first and last names, you have the patient MR numbers. Then you have the physician index. This is categorized. If you notice the very first column, these are filed according to the number issued to the doctor by the facility. So like in this case, Dr. James Smith, his facility number is 024. Dr. Jane Thompson, facility's number is 025. So when you're looking at your different type of indexes and it asks you, for doctor number 024, how many patients were seen by that doctor on 12/28 or January the 1st, you know that 024, based on the index that you have filed, you know that they're referring to Dr. James Smith. Okay, next let's talk about a little bit about registers and registries. Registers and registries. So registers and registries contain information about different diseases such as cancer or events such as births. They are maintained by the individual health facilities, both federal and state government agencies, and when I talk about that, I'm talking about law enforcement, private organizations, American Hospital Associations. Part of a register or registry contain what you call case report forms. These forms are submitted by healthcare facilities, and they're given to the providers so that the providers, to report data to sponsoring agencies, facilities, and organizations. So one thing that I want you to remember is that a registry is a collection of information, and it contains things such as a hospital admission, discharge register, while a registry, so there's a difference between the two. A register is a collection of information such as hospital admission or discharge, whereas a registry, STRY, is a structured system for collecting and maintaining health information. In what instances would you use a register? Okay, so you will use a register, remember, collection of information. You will use those to verify things such as adoptions, births, deaths, divorces, marriages. A registry, REGISTRY, you will use it to collect and sort the data that is received by the register. And that's where statistical analysis and studies information is retrieved from. You have different types. So like an admission register is usually maintained by the admissions office, organized by admission date, and it includes things such as the patient's name, the patient's number, who admitted the patient, what date was the patient admitted, what was the diagnosis upon admission, and the patient's room number. A discharge register, remember, collection of information, that's usually maintained by the HIM department. It is organized according to the discharge date, and some of the content included in it will be the patient name, the patient's number, who the attending physician is, the admission date, the discharge date, disposition, and any other services like that may be medical, surgical, OB services, and so forth. The discharge registry is used by the HIM department to account for the records of patients that are discharged. These records are assembled, these records are analyzed, these records are coded, and these records are abstracted. A death register is usually maintained by the HIM department. It is organized according to the date of death. Some of its contents include the patient's name, the patient's number, who the attending physician was, what was the admission date, what was the date of death, and any other services the patient may have had, be it medical, surgical, or OB. Now, in talking about registers and registries, we can't leave out vital statistics, okay? Vital statistics are those records that are compiled for events that includes births, deaths, fetal deaths, marriages, divorces, and these statistics are maintained by the National Center for Health Statistics. So how does the operation of registers and registries work? They are controlled by CDC, Centers for Disease Control, and they are also used by individual and groups of hospitals. They're also maintained by nonprofit organizations, state and federal agencies. So what happens when you do case abstracting? So case abstracting is automated or manual process, is usually performed by the HIM department, and basically this process is to collect patient information to determine what the patient's PPS would be, prospective payment system. So with the automated case abstracting system, it allows healthcare facilities to calculate PPS reimbursements from the DRGs, the diagnosis-related groups. You also have manual case abstracting systems, and this requires health information department staff to enter patient data on a case abstract form. So if automation is not available, there are manual cases of abstracting that can also be done, and everything would just be filled out on a form. So the next slide just kind of lists, FYI, it just kind of lists some of the different types of healthcare data sets. And of course, when I say healthcare data sets, I'm talking about health data collection that is performed by healthcare facilities for administrative planning and to report statistical information to state and federal governments. So I just have some of those listed on both this slide and the next slide. Then you have your MIB, the Medical Information Bureau. And basically, they are the clearinghouse for medical information. You also have your National Practitioner Data Bank. You may see that a lot with cancer patients or heart patients, where they keep like a wide variety of patients in a registry. It may be something, something that you could see like for individuals that are on a donor list. They're waiting on a heart, they're waiting on a kidney transplant, a bone marrow transplant. A lot of those things are kept updated by the National Practitioner Data Bank. And so one of the last things I want to talk about is how healthcare data is collected. So just to recap, the very first way is through healthcare statistics. And that's done by several different ways. Some individuals have what you call epidemiologists that or statisticians, where all they do all day is just collect data, compile it, and submit it to healthcare facilities or to the public if need be. They use that information to make sure that patients are receiving high quality care at all times. So whatever information needs to be dispersed to the public, to healthcare facilities, that's done by way of healthcare data collection. Data has to have quality to it, okay? Which means that the information that is presented must be useful. If there's ever incorrect data entered, it must be corrected immediately within the systems. Some of the things that hospitals have that are considered as hospital-based statistics are things such as Admission data. Hospitals keep up with admissions on a regular basis, even on a monthly basis, because that helps them with budgeting for the month, the quarter, the year. So they have to know admission data on a daily basis. They have to know their LOS statistics, the length of stay on a daily basis. You know, how long does a patient that comes in and have a procedure done? What is their average length of time they have to stay in the hospital? All of those are statistics of things that have to be reported to the federal and state agencies. Then they have to keep up with statistics for their discharge data as well. All right, well, that concludes the notes for Chapter 8. So move quickly into Chapter 9. So in Chapter 9, of course, for those of you all who's taken medical ethics, should be pretty much of a refresher course. For those of you all who have not gotten to medical ethics, this is more of a preview for you as you approach that particular class. We begin Chapter 9 by talking about some of the different type of terms as it requires to not only just everyday living, but also to healthcare cases as well. So, you know, we talk about you got to obey the law, you got to obey the law, you got to obey the law. But do you know the definition of the word law? So basically, a law is a rule or conduct that is passed and enforced by the government. And of course, anytime it is penalized or anytime it is violated, penalties will come into play. You have civil law and public law. So civil law is anything that deals with the legal rights of private individuals, whereas public law deals with anything between individuals and government. So an example of civil law would be torts and contracts. And torts are anything such as a wrongful act for which a civil suit can be brought. Contracts are agreements between two or more parties. Public law deals with the criminal law and regulations. So the criminal law are the crimes and their punishment. Of course, the regulations are the rules that interpret the laws. Individuals who initiate a civil complaint, person that brings a complaint against you, they have what you call the burden of proof, meaning that they have to prove that you caused some sort of harm to their loved one or even to them in a medical situation. The person who initiates the civil complaint, we call them the plaintiff. The person whom the complaint is brought against is known as the defendant. And discovery is the process that lawyers use to help obtain information so that it can be presented in the case. Interrogatory is where you are given a list of questions or a set of questions that are given to you under oath, and basically your job is to answer those questions to the best of your knowledge. Sometimes you go in a closed room and you just have different ones just, asking you a lot of questions about what took place. Impeachment, if an answer to a trial question is different from that given to the same question in the interrogative format, meaning that your stories don't add up. Deposition is basically a form of discovery so that they can dig deeper into more specific questions as to what happened in the medical case that is presented to the court. You have different sources of law. You have your administrative law, your case law, your statutory law. So your administrative law includes regulations that are created by the administrative agencies of government. Basically, it includes regulations that interpret how a law is to be enforced. With your case law, also known as common law, it is based on the judicial decisions and proceeding rather than on statute. Sometimes case law applies only to situations where the facts of a new case exactly match the facts of the case that was previously decided. And then, of course, there are some terms that go with the case law. One being res justa, And I have those in a different slide. I'll talk about those in a minute. What I wanted to do was make mention of statutory law. So the statutory law was passed is passed by the legislative body known as Congress, and it can at any point it can be amended, repealed, or expanded by the legislative body. So now let's go back to case law and let's talk about some of the different types. So res gestae, the first one I have listed, that is Latin for things done, which means that hearsay statements made during an incident are admissible as evidence. Res ipsa loquitur, second one, is Latin for the thing speaks for itself. Basically, that means everything is self-evident. Such as, in your book, give an example, if you left the surgical instrument in the patient's abdominal cavity, the thing speaks for itself, meaning that it's obvious you caused harm to that patient by way of leaving that instrumentation in that patient's body. Res judicata is Latin for the thing is decided, which means that the final judgment of the court is conclusive. It prevents the plaintiff from suing on a claim that has already been decided, and it also prevents the defendant from raising any new defense to defeat an earlier judgment. Respondent superior is Latin for let the master answer, which means that every employer is responsible for the consequences of an employee's actions. So if you employ someone, you're responsible for their actions on the job. Either you didn't train them well, you didn't follow the policy to have them terminated, something. But you're responsible for that. Stare decisis is Latin for to stand by things decided, which means that it is a doctrine of preceding and course adhere to the previous ruling. There are two different types of subpoenas. You have a subpoena testificandum, that's a court order. Testificandum, that's a court order that requires an individual to appear in court to testify by way of a court order. Court order is a written command or direction that's ordered by the court or the judge. Failure to obey the subpoena puts you in contempt of court, which is usually punishable by fine or imprisonment. Subpoena ducis tecum is a written command or direction that's signed by the clerk of the court, and that pretty much orders you to appear in court with specific documentations. In you all's case, that will be medical records. Maintaining the patient record in the normal course of business, as I've always stated, I will always state, patient record is a legal business record. It is subject to be subpoenaed to court at any time. Therefore, you are to treat it and secure it and manage it on a normal daily basis every day. Confidentiality should be practiced within the facility while talking to patients and while handling patient records. There should be disclosure tracking. There should be a tracking system for using manual or automated system for medical records. Medical records should never be just mishandled in any inappropriate way. If there is not a manual system, then there should be an automated system set up to make sure at all times patient's information is kept private and confidential. This next slide lists some of the legislations that helps to impact the way things are operated in an HIM department. And I have the next 3 slides, just have a whole list of them. Be sure to go through your book so that you can read about each one. I did not put that in the slides. I left that for you to go through your book to get that particular information. Same thing on this second slide, and then on the third slide, you have a set of legislations there. And then lastly, releasing patient information. So we know that PHI is pretty much any personal health information as it relates to the patient. Therefore, because we know that, we have to make sure that when it comes to releasing patient information, it is done in the proper way, going down through the proper channels. Never disclose information unless you're told to do so. Never disclose that. Patients have access to their records, however, they must request them in writing. And regardless whether you are releasing patients or not, you should yet still have some sort of a tracking system. All right, well, that pretty much wraps us up for chapters 8 and 9. This audio will be uploaded in the student portal. And the actual notes for chapters 8 and 9 are already in DocSharing. They're separated by chapters, so you have a separate set for 8 and a separate set for 9. Make sure you go back and read the chapters, especially be sure that you read a lot of your tables and your figures, because a lot of your tables and figures take the information given into the notes and explain it in much more detail. Thank you.